Welcome to Golden Blue, everybody, home of the college football fan. And don't forget about the checklist. Hat check, sunglasses check, Pepsi check, notes check, sources check, and thick skin is a check. And don't forget to sing gear to represent your team and yourself in my background. Send it to P.O. Box 360, Liberty, South Carolina, 29657, and get yourself a shout out. On to the next video. Hey, you already know what time it is, so might as well sit down, brace yourself, and buckle up because you are entering the speculation zone. Now, ever since this story about the Four Corners talking to the Big 12 and possibly wanting to go to the Big 12 came out, a lot of people have been saying, nah, that's just Big 12 propaganda. And they literally think that the Big 12 has a propaganda committee and is paying everybody off. Apparently, I'm paid off by the Big 12. The Monty Show is paid off by the Big 12. Dennis Dodd is paid off by the Big 12. 365 Sports is paid off by the Big 12. CBS Sports is paid off by the Big 12. ESPN is paid off by the Big 12. I mean, that just doesn't make sense. So, I'm not sure how that particular rumor got started, but I think it's absolutely hilarious. Honestly, it'd be pretty cool if the Big 12 paid me off to do all these stories. I'd be making a lot of money, and I'd be able to afford a much luxurious lifestyle. Unfortunately, that is not the case. And on this particular video, I want to talk about the chances of Washington State and Oregon State going to the Big 12. In case you're wondering, these are the teams that we don't have represented for the mini helmets. As you can see, we actually have quite a few big brands that's not represented here at Golden Blue. I do know that Nevada and Cincinnati are on their way as far as mini helmet representation. So get your team represented here on Golden Blue. Now, I stated some of these sources on a previous video, but I think they're relevant to this particular video, so I want to quote them again. This will be a Get It Gang video. If you don't know what the Get It Gang is, it's basically a name that I came up with for the group of people that leave video dids in the comment section of my video. So if you think you have a good video did, leave it in the comment section of my video and I just might make a video on it. This Get It Gang video idea is from Carrie Lee. It says, from the Monty Show, they are saying Utah is listening and talking to Big 12. But ASU, Arizona State, is holding out with UW and may not be in lockstep with Arizona after all. If that is true, I wonder if WSU, Washington State, is willing to bolt from UW. And who knows if OSU is willing to break away from Oregon and go to the Big 12. Well, honestly, yes, I think that both of those two teams would be willing to break off from Washington and Oregon respectively. Because here's the thing, Oregon and Washington, they want to go to the Big 10. The Big 10 isn't going to accept Washington State and Oregon State. So they're not going to have a choice anyways. So either they stay in the Pac-12 and they're separated from Washington and Oregon, or they bolt to the Big 12 and they're still separated from Oregon and Washington. Either way, they're separated from Oregon and Washington. So they have to make the best decision as it relates to being separated from Oregon and Washington. And right now, if the Big 12 is on the table, that would be the best decision. Because this entire story is centered around the Pac-12 having a terrible TV deal. The number that I keep hearing over and over and over is $22 million per team per year. That's a solid $10 million less per team per year than the Big 12. And on top of that, to compound the situation, Oregon and Washington, they're wanting unequal revenue share. Now, the most that the Pac-12 can afford to pay them for unequal revenue share with this bad TV deal would be $30 million per team per year, which is still a solid $10 million less per team per year than what the Big Ten is wanting them for. They're willing to shell out $40 million per team per year for Oregon and Washington. So with that unequal revenue share on a bad TV deal, the rest of these teams are getting screwed. And that's why they're interested in the Big 12. Interesting twist though, and I made a video earlier in the day you might want to check out about this. Arizona State, it looks like they're maybe not as interested in the Big 12 as we thought. Arizona and Colorado, it seems like they have committed in principle. In fact, let me read a source for that. This was from Big 12 Fandemonium, and I quoted this on the previous video as well. It looks like Colorado and Arizona are verbally committed. Monty Show is also saying Utah and Gonzaga have done the same. That just leaves Arizona State. Also hearing subtle rumbling is that Wazoo, Washington State, nothing solid there, but they aren't completely out of the picture. Things are moving fast. I'm also going to quote Greg Swam, who I quoted from my previous video. So this is Greg Swam from The Swam Show. I know it's late, but just got a text from a well-regarded West Coast scout who's at the Pac-12 tournament in Vegas. And he swears that two teams, Colorado and Arizona, have committed in principle, his words not mine, to joining the Big 12. So guess I'll be up all night at twitter.com/gswam. So once again, that solidifies that Colorado and Arizona, they have committed in principle. They have verbally committed to the Big 12. But we're talking about Oregon State and Washington State. So the reason I wanted to talk about these two teams is it directly relates to Arizona and Arizona State. Now the biggest thing here is I thought that there was state legislation that locks in Arizona with Arizona State. In other words, Wherever Arizona goes, Arizona State must go, and wherever Arizona State goes, Arizona goes. So if that's the case, it wouldn't even matter if Arizona is interested in the Big 12 if Arizona State doesn't want to go in the Big 12. Because Arizona State, if they want to remain in the Pac-12, that means Arizona would also have to remain in the Pac-12. And that would leave two open spots, Colorado and Utah, still to the Big 12. But those two other spots, that could open up for Washington State and Oregon State. Now, on a side note, even if that state legislation doesn't exist and Arizona still wants to go, but Arizona State doesn't, that leaves one open spot. And that could go to either Washington State and Oregon State. Sorry, Oregon State fans, but if there's only one spot, that would definitely go to Washington State. Washington State does have a better brand. They do have a bigger fan base, top 25 in the entire nation. They also have that tradition of where they fly Old Crimson, the Washington State Cougar State flag that they fly at every ESPN game day. So that would be excellent exposure for the Big 12 because Washington State would be in the Big 12. So if it comes down to one spot, I'm sorry, Oregon State fans, but you would be SOL unless the Big 12 wants to expand beyond 4 members right now. That's your only out card. And if that's the case, then we're talking about, and this is assuming there is no Arizona legislation that ties Arizona to Arizona State, you'd have Arizona, Colorado, Utah, Washington State, Oregon State, and then maybe San Diego State. Because I said this in my earlier video, it looks like the Pac-12 is looking for teams that would be willing to be okay with unequal revenue share for Oregon and Washington because it looks like the Pac-12 does want to do that. They want to keep Oregon and Washington, even though Oregon and Washington only want to sign a grant of rights 3 years, no longer. Nothing past 3 years. So they're willing to sacrifice the rest of the conference just to keep 2 brands. Yes, they're going to make a lot of money. They are the most valuable brands, but for only 3 years. Because eventually, I do think Oregon and Washington end up in the Big Ten. Who knows? Maybe they could end up in the Big Ten sooner rather than later because it looks like the Big Ten is interested in Oregon and Washington as a reduced revenue share. We're talking about $40 million per team per year, and the most that the Pac-12 could afford to pay Oregon and Washington, even with unequal revenue share because of this bad TV deal, would be $30 million per team per year, which would be $10 million less than the Big Ten. But maybe Oregon and Washington are okay with that for 3 years because remember, playoff expansion. The champion of the Pac-12 is guaranteed a spot in the playoffs. So maybe they do want to stick around in the Pac-12 for those 3 years and see if they can get in the playoffs by winning the Pac-12 and taking that $10 million hit. But once that 3 years is up, boom, they're off to the Big Ten. So all that compiling on top of a bad TV deal, these other teams are looking to get out because no, they do not want to have a reduced revenue share on an already bad TV deal. So the Pac-12 is looking at these Mountain West teams who more than likely are willing to take that reduced revenue share because that's still way more than what they would make in the Mountain West. I'm talking about San Diego State, possibly Fresno State, SMU. They're interested in Colorado State. Who knows? Maybe they talk to Rice or Tulane, possibly Boise State for their football brand. All these teams would be okay with a reduced revenue share to keep Oregon and Washington for 3 more years. And like I said in the previous video, if I were San Diego State and Fresno State, I would make sure 100% without a shadow of a doubt that there is no chance that the Big 12 would bring you in because you don't want to choose the Pac-12 if the Big 12 is looking at you and you would make way more money in the Big 12. So just make sure that the Big 12 is off the table before you commit to the Pac-12. Make no mistake about it, going to the Pac-12 is better than the Mountain West. That is a good decision. Just make sure that the Big 12 is off the table. The reason I mention that is if they bring in 6 teams, then that leaves 1 spot open for a possible group of 5 team. And I'm thinking it would be San Diego State. That would give them a solid footprint in Southern California for the Big 12. So if I were you, San Diego State, just make sure 100% without a shadow of doubt that the Big 12 is off the table before you commit to the Pac-12. So yes, there is hope for Oregon State and Washington State, but it depends on the Arizona schools. It looks like Arizona State isn't interested in going to the Big 12 right now. That opens up 1 spot. Arizona is, but if that state legislation exists, that opens up 2 spots. Y'all in the comment section. Number 1, do you think Washington State and Oregon State are able to get into the Big 12? Number 2, do you think Arizona State changes their mind and possibly the Big 12 brings in all 6 of them? Colorado, Utah, Arizona, Arizona State, Washington State, and Oregon State. And number 3, do you think there's any chance that the Big 12 wants any of these group of 5 teams? I'm talking about Fresno State, San Diego State, maybe a Boise State on an outside chance. That's all I got for this show. Like and subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you on my next show.